Every story leaves a mark, but where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love seeing how far these stories reach. If this journey moved you, inspired you, or made you think twice about second chances, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss tomorrow's next powerful chapter. We have something special coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, the past doesn't define you, but what you do next just might. She was erased by her family at 18. But came back to destroy their lives. It was 36 degrees outside when Emily Harris was kicked out of her family's home. She stood at the massive oak doors of the Harris estate, 6,000 square feet of marble, chandeliers, and silence. Her father, Thomas Harris, didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His words were sharp, final. "You're 18. Figure it out." Beside him, her mother Evelyn clutched a glass of wine, her expression frozen in polished indifference. "You've always been a drain, Emily," she said calmly, as if she were stating a fact. "We've given you enough. You're on your own now." And just behind them, her younger sister Rachel, wrapped in a designer coat, barely 19, smirked. This is what happens when you waste everyone's time. The door slammed shut before Emily could say a word. She stood there for a moment, stunned. Just her, a thin hoodie, her backpack, and $17.28 in her pocket. Her breath fogged in the air as the cold began to bite through her clothes. The driveway stretched out behind her, empty and endless. No one came after her. She walked for hours. Her hands went numb. Her phone died. The bus station wanted $24.50 for a one-way ticket, money she didn't have. So she wandered. For 3 nights, Emily slept behind a diner off Route 7, pressed against the back wall where the kitchen vents blew out just enough heat to keep her from freezing. She curled up beside the dumpsters, clutching her bag to her chest. Her stomach growled. Her body ached. Her pride kept her from begging. Until the 4th morning, when someone finally noticed. Linda Rowe, the owner of Maple's Diner, stood above her in a heavy coat and boots, holding a to-go cup of black coffee. She didn't yell. Didn't threaten. Just looked at Emily, then tossed a broom at her feet. "If you're gonna sleep back here," she said, "you might as well earn it." That was the moment everything changed. Emily swept floors, scrubbed grease off stovetops, cleared dishes, and worked double shifts with blistered hands and no complaints. By the end of the month, Linda let her sleep on an old cot in the storage room. By the end of the year, Emily had saved enough to enroll at Windsor Community College. She studied during her breaks. She worked nights and weekends. She said no to parties, to distractions, to everything that didn't move her forward. And when she earned a full scholarship to a top business program, she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Because deep down, beneath every sleepless night, every missed meal, every floor she mopped, she remembered that door slamming in her face. She remembered what it felt like to be unwanted. And she swore she would never let anyone make her feel that powerless again. Emily Harris may have been thrown away, but she wasn't done. She was just getting started. Success didn't happen overnight. For Emily Harris, it was built in silence, one small win at a time. After 2 years at Windsor Community College, she graduated top of her class. Her scholarship to Westbridge School of Business came next, and with it, a world she never thought she'd be part of: networking events, internships, boardrooms. She worked 30 hours a week at the diner, studied through the night, and wore the same 3 blouses on rotation. But she was focused. Unshakable. At 23, Emily landed a competitive internship at BioNutra Health, a fast-growing startup in the medical nutrition space. She worked under pressure, took risks, and asked questions no one else dared to ask. By the time she was 25, she'd been promoted twice. But that still wasn't enough. The memories of her family's cold rejection followed her like shadows. The Harris name meant nothing to her now, only a reminder of who she'd never become. At 26, she launched CoreVital, a direct-to-consumer medical nutrition brand focused on affordable, science-backed wellness. It started in a borrowed kitchen, with just $3,000 in startup cash and 2 sleepless months of development. She packed orders herself, answered customer emails by hand, and poured every dollar back into growth. The brand exploded. Within a year, it crossed $2.5 million in revenue. She was featured in online magazines, interviewed on podcasts, invited to conferences. Emily Harris, once the girl sleeping behind a diner, was now a rising name in health innovation. But her family never reached out. Not a call. Not a message. Not a hint that they even knew who she had become. And honestly, that was fine. Until one ivory envelope arrived at her company's headquarters. No return address. Just her name written in elegant script. Inside was a wedding invitation. Rachel Evelyn Harris and Brandon Lewis request the honor of your presence. Emily froze. Her little sister. The golden child. Getting married at the Bellwood Grand Hotel, a place soaked in old money and family legacy. She stared at the invitation for a long time, heart pounding. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a test. A reminder. A message that whispered, "You still don't belong here." But this time, she wasn't the girl left out in the cold. She was the woman who had built her own empire. Brick by brick. Battle by battle. So she RSVP'd yes. She found a simple, elegant black dress, $150, bought from a small boutique she liked to support. She didn't need glitter or designer heels. She didn't need a dramatic entrance. She just needed to show up. Not to crash the wedding. Not for revenge. But because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk into the room they swore you'd never be in again, stand tall, silent, unbothered, and let the truth make the noise. And at that moment, Emily Harris knew one thing for sure: she wasn't there to be seen. She was there to be reckoned with. The lobby of the Bellwood Grand Hotel shimmered like something out of a movie, gold-trimmed elevators, towering floral displays, soft jazz floating in the air. Emily Harris stepped inside without hesitation. Heads turned, but not because anyone recognized her. Not yet. She moved with quiet confidence, her black dress fitting like it was made for moments like this. Her hair was simple. Her makeup, clean. She wasn't here to make a scene, but if one happened, she'd be ready. The ballroom doors were wide open, spilling laughter, clinking glasses, and candlelight into the hallway. Inside, the Harris family held court like royalty. Thomas Harris stood near the bar, scotch in hand. Evelyn laughed politely at something a guest had said. And at the center, glowing in designer white, was Rachel, the bride-to-be, the golden child, the one they always protected. Emily took a step forward. And then, like a sharp blade slicing through silk, her mother's voice rang out. "Why is she here?" The music didn't stop, but the air shifted. Guests paused. Conversations faltered. Thomas didn't turn. Rachel froze, then forced a smile, her eyes narrowing. "You're not on the guest list," she said loudly, the words meant to sting. Emily smiled softly. She had expected that. "I know," she replied. "But I RSVP'd. You just didn't check the name." She took another step. The marble floor clicked beneath her heels. "I'm Emily Harris," she said. "Maybe you've heard of me." A few murmurs rippled across the crowd. People looked closer now. Whispers passed from one table to the next. And then, someone else reacted. Brandon Lewis, Rachel's fiancé, went pale. He stared at Emily like she was a ghost. Emily tilted her head, letting the moment breathe. "You recognize me," she said, her tone calm, almost amused. Brandon said nothing. Rachel, ever the performer, let out a sarcastic laugh. "You're just here to cause drama. Couldn't handle being forgotten, huh? Still desperate for attention?" Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her clutch and unfolded a single piece of paper. She held it out, just high enough for Brandon to read. His eyes scanned it once. Then again. The color drained from his face. "What is this?" he asked, voice low. Rachel leaned in to peek. Emily's smile sharpened. "It's her academic record," she said evenly. "Turns out your bride never finished medical school. Not even close." Gasps. Whispers turned into low murmurs. Rachel tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. "You're lying." "I'm not," Emily replied. "But you are." The tension thickened like a storm cloud overhead. Brandon took a step back. The document in his hands trembled. "You told me you graduated," he said. "You swore." "I said what I had to," Rachel snapped. But it was too late. Because now, everyone was listening. And Emily? She wasn't done. Not even close. This wasn't just a reunion. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The ballroom fell silent. Rachel's fake laugh had evaporated. Brandon was still holding the paper, his jaw clenched, the engagement ring on his hand suddenly feeling heavy. Emily didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Because the truth was doing all the work. "Brandon," Rachel hissed, trying to keep control, "she's just trying to ruin my wedding, she's jealous." But Brandon didn't look at her. He looked at Emily. "Is this real?" he asked quietly, his voice raw. Emily nodded once. Rachel let out a sharp breath and grabbed his arm, desperation bleeding through her polished facade. "Baby, please, don't believe her. You know how she is. She twists everything." But Brandon had already stepped back. "I defended you," he said, shaking his head. "I stood up to my family, to my friends. And you, what? Lied for years?" "I did it for us," she shouted. "For our future." But her voice cracked, and the room heard it. And Emily, she wasn't done. She turned slowly, facing her mother. Evelyn Harris still stood tall, champagne flute in hand, her face hard as stone. "Enough of this nonsense," Evelyn snapped. "You've made your little scene. That's enough." Emily's gaze didn't waver. Not quite. She reached into her clutch again and pulled out a small black USB drive. Her father, standing by the bar, tensed. Just slightly. But Emily saw it. "What's that?" Rachel asked, voice trembling now. Emily held it between her fingers like a match before a flame. "This," she said, "contains internal financial records, email threads, and proof of insurance fraud linked to the Harris Family Wellness Clinic." Gasps echoed. One guest actually dropped their glass. Thomas Harris stiffened. His jaw twitched. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her drink. "I had everything checked when I changed my legal name," Emily said, her tone calm but cutting. "Imagine my surprise when I found out someone had been using my social security number for 10 years. "No one will believe this," Evelyn said quickly, her voice shaking for the first time. Emily smiled coldly. "They already do." And then someone stepped forward. Dr. Howard Manning, the hospital director, face flushed, eyes furious. He turned to Thomas. "You told me her credentials were real. That Rachel was board certified. You vouched for her." Thomas tried to speak, but Manning raised a hand. "I want your license. Your records. Everything. And I'm calling legal." Panic set in like fire across dry grass. Evelyn's lips moved, but no sound came. Thomas looked for a way out. Rachel stood frozen, tears forming, her entire future crumbling. Brandon slipped off his ring. He dropped it at Rachel's feet. The sound of it hitting marble was louder than any scream. And Emily? She didn't flinch. She simply whispered, "You used me. You lied. You stole. And now, you're going to answer for it." Because the girl they erased had come back. But she hadn't come for forgiveness. She came for the truth. and the truth was setting the entire room on fire. The silence after the storm was deafening. Rachel stood motionless in the center of the ballroom, tears streaking her makeup, her engagement ring lying untouched at her feet. Her once perfect wedding dress pulled around her like a collapsed throne. The guests, dozens of them, watched in stunned disbelief. No one stepped forward to help her. Not even Evelyn. Thomas Harris tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat as security approached. Dr. Manning had already made the call. Legal was involved. The IRS wouldn't be far behind. Years of secrets unraveled in under 10 minutes. And all of it had started with the daughter they threw away. Emily didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She just stood there, composed, centered, powerful. For years, she had imagined what this moment would feel like, what revenge might taste like. But now that it was here, she realized, it wasn't about revenge. It was about release. Thomas lunged forward, but security blocked him instantly. Evelyn reached out toward Emily, her voice lowering to a carefully calculated tone. "Emily, please. We're still family." That word. Family. Emily turned slowly, eyes calm, shoulders back. "No," she said softly. "You stopped being family the day you shut that door in my face." "We made mistakes," Evelyn said, her voice trembling now, her mask cracking. "But we can fix this," Emily cut her off with a glance. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice." For a second, Evelyn looked like she might break, but she didn't. She turned away instead, clinging to what little pride she had left. Thomas muttered curses as he was let out of the ballroom, his empire collapsing in real time. Rachel looked up, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Emily. Please." Emily paused. There was a time when hearing her sister beg like that would have shattered her. A time when she still longed to be accepted, to be loved, to be seen. But that girl? She died on the sidewalk 9 years ago. Emily stepped past the wreckage, the ring, the torn flowers, the crumbled egos, and walked out of the ballroom without looking back. The air outside was crisp and clear, like the first breath after holding it for far too long. And there he was. Jason stood by the curb, hands in his pockets, waiting. He didn't ask how it went. He didn't have to. He looked at her the way no one ever had, like she was enough. He raised a brow, lips curving slightly. "So, cake?" Emily blinked. Then laughed, a real laugh. One that started in her chest and made its way all the way to her eyes. "Yes," she said, smiling. "Let's get cake." Because this wasn't the end of a fight. It was the beginning of freedom. And Emily Harris? She didn't need a last name to prove who she was anymore. She wasn't what they said. She was what she built. And now, she was finally, truly free. This story wasn't just about revenge, it was about rising from the ashes, breaking free, and reclaiming your voice when the world tries to silence you. But now, we want to hear your voice. What part of Emily's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told you didn't belong, only to prove them wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share your story, your strength, or just a message for anyone out there who might need a reminder that they're not alone. Every voice matters here, and yours might just be the one someone else needs to hear today. And hey, don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing this community grow across the world. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think a little deeper, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss tomorrow's next emotional, powerful story. There's so much more to come. Your next chapter might be closer than you think.